Hi, everyone. How's it going? I'm Roger Mittag. I'm the host of the Style Sessions. I'm also the president of Thirst for Knowledge and the founder of Prud'homme Beer Certification. And we've been fortunate enough to run these sessions throughout the last year. And I'm pretty excited about bringing this topic to you tonight. So it's a nice cold winter night. It's good for a Belgian quad. And we'll talk a little bit more. There's lots of really cool and interesting things happening in the beer world these days. I think everybody's getting ready to open up. And oh, hello, Harold. I figured you might be first with quads being our oh, what do you have? Chimay Blue, Gregorius, La Trappe quad, Rochefort 8 and 10, Spencer quad, Zunder 10, Judiciel, Rigor Mortis, Gulden Drac, St. Bernardus up 12, Unibrew. Oh my God. Like, how do you figure that one out? Hi, Dave and Kathy. Hello. Welcome. This is your first visit. I have a story about Dave in a second that we'll share with you guys. Hello, Bess. You have all four, any two that you'd recommend to pair. I'm going to give you my tasting notes on Zundert and Rochefort 10. So if you want to follow along, that would be great. Hello, Marisa. Happy Valentine's Day and Family Day to you as well. Those would be the two that I'm going to talk the most about, but I really don't mind talking about any of the others as well. And, you know, Harold's got so many decisions with like a list of quads that are beyond belief. Should be a fun night, actually. I was, I was contemplating last week when I sat and I had my quads listed out that we were going to do today. I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is probably going to be a really short discussion. And then I started doing a little bit of homework and reviewing things a little bit. And then I suddenly realized that this could very well be one of my longest sessions. So I've got lots planned while we're waiting for everybody else to join. It's hello, Craig. Yeah, Harold, or Vass, nice try. I don't think Harold's sending any of that stuff over. So I've got quite a few. I got a real nice, hello, Jared. Nice to see you join. Jared's in my level 4 class. Um, yeah, I got a really nice delivery the other day. I know some of you saw it when I posted it on Instagram, but a company called Polybeer is bringing a lot of Belgian beers into the market, especially in Ontario. I think only in Ontario. And they reached out to me. Somehow we got a connection. And he drove out last night and dropped some things off. Oh, Chris, you'll like this. So I've got about, I think, 8 really cool beers, a couple of Grand Crus, and some things from Haveman, which is Half Moon in Bruges. But one of the things I'm going to offer up is these guys do private orders, and not everything is available at retail. And I was thinking about getting a group together to find out if we bought cases of something, who would be interested in that. So I'll send you all an email at some point asking you if you want to play in. Oh my God, Craig's got Saint Fuyien. Ah, cool. Zunder 10, Rochefort 10, Unibrew Tarib. Tarib's a bit of a challenge on a quad perspective. It's got a little bit more spice character than I like. Chimay, Saint Fuyien, nice. Um, wow, Harold, 2018. The one I have is 2020, so we're not that far behind. But we should have a ton of fun. I got lots of stories for you tonight and some new and interesting things. I figured you'd be in, Bess. I figure Harold will be in and a whole bunch of other people along the way. And if Chris Arnold isn't in because he's bugging me to go to Belgium someday, then I don't know what the hell is going on. Um, Perfect. I love St. Few, and I think they're a great brewery. I've got some stuff that these guys sent me last night from Abbé de Roque and also, what is it, Vadieu, I think. So I'm really eager to try these and write my tasting notes. So the other day, I'm thinking, I've got to do quads, and I'm pretty good on understanding what that style is. But I started going back into time and checking my tasting notes, and it's been a really long time since I wrote tasting notes for any quadruple. And so in the last couple of days, I actually sat down with Rochefort 10 and Zundert 10 and wrote my tasting notes. So I've got them right in front of me. I'm going to share them with you later, but I think we're in far enough now that we can open a beer and taste it. But before you guys open your beer, I'm going to show you how a Belgian would pour this beer. So key thing about Belgian is you have to have the right glass. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a Rochefort glass with me. Anne's got the Zundert upstairs. I'm going to do Rochefort 10. And I don't have a Rochefort glass. For anybody listening out there, I could use a Rochefort glass. It's a little shallower on the bowl, but I'm using this glass. And it will do nicely for what I want. So I'm just going to open the bottle. And in Belgium, it's very important that you are not hearing too much noise coming out of the bottle. So you have to be very gentle. And the reason that you're so gentle is you do not want to arouse the yeast because there's a benefit to it at the end. So we're being excessively gentle with this beautiful Rochefort 10, and I'll explain a little bit more about Rochefort in a bit. But once I'm there, I'm going to stop. I've got a little bit left in my bottle, but what I'm now going to do is swirl it around, and I'm going to pour it into a shot glass. And this is very, very typical of what you would see in Belgium, is that you pour the sediment, or what we know as the yeast, into a shot glass. And then you serve them separately and allow the guests to decide whether they want the sediment or whether they just want the beer that's clear. For my purposes, I always want the sediment. I think the sediment adds body, it adds flavor. It is just really, really cool to do. So I'm going to pour mine directly in. And what I'm getting is all of the yeast, all of the sediment, all of the particulate. So, cheers. Now, Belgian quadruples are meant to be sipped and savored. And they're not meant to be hurried along. They're meant to enjoy life. And, we know that monastic life is one about appreciating things that are around us and being more aware and more mindful of the world and contributing to the world in a better way. And I can just see the monks sitting back on a cold winter's night in Belgium and enjoying a quadruple just for the sake of enjoying the quadruple. So there's a lot to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about the Trappist appellation or the designation. We're going to talk about all of the different beer styles that go in it. And we're going to talk about quadruples. And so there's lots of really good discussion that we can have. So the biggest thing is, because we're talking about quads tonight, why don't we sit and look at the history of quadruples? And it's really, really difficult to nail them down because there is no specific date that is assigned to the assumption of a quadruple. There is with doubles and triples, because there was a very specific date in which a recipe was released by a certain brewery. With quadruples, or quads, the belief is that the La Trappe monastery in the Netherlands is the first to have produced a quadruple or named a quadruple in that case. I had a really interesting conversation with someone over Instagram the other day when I posted those 4 pictures, and I posted it as Chimay as being a quad. And they asked me, is Chimay really a quad, or does it fit into that category? Well, the interesting thing is when you go on to the Trappist website, Chimay is actually designated as a quad. So, question answered. So, what makes a quad? Well, let's go back, because we have to understand how this whole thing started and what the naming conventions are with the Trappist breweries. Because the Trappist breweries typically are very much about singles, doubles, triples, and quads. Singles are also known as blondes. We've already discussed blondes. But singles are also known as an enkel beer or a potter's beer. A potter is a father, so it could either be the father's beer. Enkel in Dutch is very similar to German, so enkel in German means grand or grandchild. So these are the beers that the fathers would drink on a daily basis. They're the ones with the lowest amount of alcohol in them. They're basically viewed as table beers. So then we jump up to doubles. And doubles were created in 1926 by the Westmalle Brewery, who introduced actually into the 1800s, but the newest recipe or the most recent recipe is 1926. Westmalle, which is a Trappist monastery, introduced this new darker beer with a little bit more body and flavor to it. So that was the first double. Then we move up to 1934, and in 1934 they released, Westmalle again, released the very first higher alcohol strength blonde beer, which they named Triple. And that's the same recipe that we're seeing Westmalle produce now. And I found a Westmalle in the LCBO the other day, Westmalle Triple, which I'm really excited about. So then we move forward into more modern times, and the Trappist appellation is really only something that we've seen since the 1990s. And there's a lot of changes that have been happening recently, and I want to update you on some of the changes, because when I'm doing my classes, people often come up to me and say, hey, by the way, your book's wrong or your information's wrong. So I've got updated info. So depending on where you ask, some people will tell you that there are 14 Trappist breweries in the world that are producing beer. And my answer to that is that's not 100% true, because the Trappist designation, the symbol that you can find on the back of a bottle that says right there, is something that you have to earn. So the beer has to be produced in the walls of the monastery, has to be produced either by monks under the supervision of monks, and all of the funds that are created from, hello Danny and Chantal, all of the funds created from the sales of the beer must go back into the community, into the charitable work the monks do, or into repair of the monastery or the brewery itself. So those are the stipulations to be able to use the Trappist logo. So the reality is there are 4 Trappist monasteries in the world that are selling beer. Only 11 of them, it used to be 12, only 11 of them are actually entitled to use that particular logo. So let me explain a little bit further. First of all, Achel, which is one of the 6 Belgian Trappist monasteries, is no longer designated to be able to use the logo because the very last monk has left the order, which means that the beer is still being produced. It's being produced by Westmalle, but there's no one at the monastery anymore, and because there's no monks there, hey Charles, how are you? Charles was one of my students at George Brown a few years ago, the first year that I taught there. So Achel is now no longer considered one of the 6 Belgian Trappist breweries and one of the 12, so they're out. The other 2 are relatively recent. One is called Monticat in France, and the other one is Cardenya in Spain. Now, both of these are registered Trappist breweries, but neither one of them produces beer within the walls of the monastery, so therefore they are excluded from using the Trappist logo on their beers. Monticat is, their beers are produced by Chimay, and Cardenya is produced offsite somewhere, and they haven't really indicated where the beers are being produced. So we still now only have 11 of the monasteries are able to use the Trappist logo. Harold, Achel Brewing Extra in the LCBO system, no stock. Yeah, Quite possibly. This is where I get to introduce Dave because Dave signed in a little while earlier. One of the huge things, and I know a lot of you might be really interested in this, I happened to venture into Toronto the other day because I really wanted to be able to pick up a few more beers that I couldn't get out here. So when I was in the LCBO at Queens Quay, I noticed that they had Orval, but they only had one bottle of Orval. And when I asked them if they had some more, they said, we don't, but Avenue Road LCBO does. So I ventured up to Avenue Road, went in there, met Dave. It's the first time I've ever met Dave. And Dave was thrilled beyond belief that I was so interested in Orval. And we had a long discussion, and I told him I took an entire case because I basically want to keep it here and age it because I want to be able to use it in my classes as we're moving forward. So I've got a whole case of Orval. If any of you want Orval, go down to the Avenue Road in Lawrence, LCBO, go see Dave. He'll be happy to set you up. It's a great price. It's somewhere around $4, I think. But you can get, Dave's got lots of Orval. I think he ordered a ton of it for those Belgian beer enthusiasts that we all know. Let me see, where else can I take you? All right. So what makes a double? What makes a triple? What makes a quad? In the end, there's lots of rumors. The rumors are, they used to say 1x for the singles, 2x for the doubles, 3x for the triples, 4x for the quads. Some people thought there was other reasons behind it. Maybe it was illiteracy. It was supposed to be 4 times the alcohol, 3 times, 2 times. Craig's got an Orval in Peterborough. Excellent. Orval, good. Nice. All right. Harold's always on top of things. But here's a real thing. Really, the difference between singles, doubles, triples, and quads is the designation of the fermentable sugars or the available malt profile that is going to contribute to a higher alcohol percentage. So double the amount of fermentable sugars, triple the amount of fermentable sugars, and quadruple the amount of fermentable sugars. So all very interesting as far as I'm concerned. My God. Daniel James, Rogers Beer Fridge also has Orval. So yeah, it's waiting here for you, my son. So here's the thing. I'm reviewing Rochefort 10 and Zunder today with you guys. But let me tell you a little bit about this. Rochefort numbers their beers 6, 8, and 10. And nobody has really done a great job of really interpreting what that means. But the reality is it goes back to a very, very old Belgian way of assessing alcohol content, and that's by original gravity. So the 6 is 1.06 gravity, and the 8 is 1.08, and the 10 is 1.10. Now, that also translates to another alcohol measurement called Plato. And so the 10 is actually 20 Plato, and the 8 is 16 Plato, and the 6 is 12 Plato. So it's really hard to figure out exactly what the alcohol content on that, but that's the rationale behind the numbers. So if I take something that's 20 Plato, like Rochefort 10, it translates into 11.5% alcohol by volume. So if you ever hear some brewer deciding that they are really crafty and they're going to tell you how many degrees Plato are in their beer, you virtually have to just cut it in half, and that'll give you roughly the alcohol percentage. Where else can we head on this? Typically, quadruples are above 9%, and some people would argue that something called a Grand Cru is the same as a quadruple, but that's not necessarily the case. In the wine world or in other beverages, Grand Cru is typically the brewery's best choice. That is the thing that they're most proud of. And so most of the times that I've ever had a Grand Cru, it really is a quad. And Tarib could probably be in that Grand Cru perspective. I personally like 17 better than Tarib. I find Tarib a little bit more on the spice note. Um, but it's a really really interesting discussion to have. In essence, these are what a lot of us would look at in the LCBO or around as being dark Belgian ales or strong Belgian ales, and anything over 5.6 needs the designation of strong if you're in Ontario. So let me just go over my tasting notes with you. I'm not going to try to recite them from memory because it's ridiculous to try to do that. But let me give you an idea. So Zunder 10 I tasted first. It's 10% ABV. It's colors, and this is where it's really nice to go back every once in a while and sort of figure out what your perception is of these beers. I've always viewed them as being very very dark beers, but both the beers that I've had in the last couple of days have really turned out to enlighten me a little bit more. They weren't as dark brown as I had envisioned them in the past. So the color on Zunder 10 was burgundy, ruby, and crimson. It had this beautiful cappuccino colored foam, but the bubbles were really loose and dissipated very, very quickly. It was a slightly hazy appearance to me. It wasn't overly cloudy. The aromatics that I got started off with dates, figs, and prunes, led into molasses. I got notes of burnt sugar, black licorice, black pumpernickel, because pumpernickel comes in browns and blacks, and also some really nice, dense, dark fruitcake. This is where things change because I find quads are brilliant on the nose, but they don't represent the same characteristics on the palate. And the taste for me on the Zunder 10 was lots of prunes, again, figs, black licorice, black bread, and a little hint of bright anise. I found the mouthfeel to be sparkling and tingling, which is something that I would expect because these beers are all re-fermented, which means they have yeast added back into the body of the beer. So lots of CO2 is developed underneath the cap. The finish to me was moderate. It did have a longer mouth coating aftertaste, and I found that the aftertaste was actually quite dry as well. So not as sweet as I've had in the past. Then I move on to Rochefort 10. And with Rochefort 10, 11.3% ABV. This one was cloudy, in fact, a little bit chunky. So some of the yeast had flocculated together and it creates bigger chunks. In a dark beer, I don't really find that offensive at all. And I'm just reading what Craig has to say. Yeah, I'm not a fan of nitro in very many things. I think nitro works really well with Guinness, and then everybody wants to get into nitro. But I think nitro doesn't do what I would want, is generate good foam and bring flavor out. Belgians do stouts really nicely. Spearhead just gave me one recently, and I've got some tasting notes that I'm going to post online this week. But let me get back to Rochefort. So cloudy, a little bit chunky. Color was really cool. I found it to be a blood orange burgundy and almost a fresh apple cider kind of hue to it. Loose bubbles again, really light mocha color on the foam. The nose was way different than the Zundert. Yeah, Danny, good question. Normally speaking, bubblegum would be big on triples and blondes and not so much on the doubles and the quads. However, in the Rochefort 10, I got quite a bit of bubblegum. It was late when I was smelling things. What I got first was anise, sour cherry, clove, nutmeg. So to me, it reminded me more of mulling spice. A little bit of licorice in there as well, some bubblegum, and a little bit of mustiness, which is one thing that I expect, especially on beers that can age really well. So this one, I think, like I said, is a 2010. And Harold's got a 2008, so the mustiness tends to be there the longer you give it shelf life. In the flavor profile, I got some amazing caramelized banana, some black licorice, some toasted almond, pumpernickel, a little bit of nutmeg, and some dark cherry on the back end of it. Again, I found it to be a little bit of a longer finish with a more lingering aftertaste. It had a really, really sharp tingle and spritz on the tongue when I first got it, but as it's opening up, it's a little easier at that part of it. Quite bitter, quite dry, a little bit more on the tannic side of it. So those are my tasting notes on these particular beers. Harold, notes of the Zunder are a little bit more spicy. Sure, like we're all, in a different place, and I think my tasting notes happened earlier on in the day, and one of the things that I've sort of realized over the last little while when I'm doing these, I'm actually doing level one classes and with a bunch of different groups, and some in the morning and some in the evening. My palate is so different at this time of night than it is earlier in the day. And I know, most of us don't try beers at 11 or 12 or even 1 o'clock in the morning. Not 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, but I think that everybody's going to get a little bit different on it. And, I'm perfectly fine with everybody finding certain different characteristics out of each of these beers. I remember a little while ago I had a Zundert and I wasn't really paying attention to it. And I would agree with Harold. I think I found it a lot more spicy. This one presented so much dark fruit to me, which is interesting as a whole. So, excuse me. Thank you, Bess. Um, you know, on Bess's comment, I none of us are really born with amazing palates. I think it's just something that you develop and something that you take time with. And I think every one of us can reach a certain level where we're starting to taste a lot of variety of different things. I think the biggest thing, and I said this earlier, is just being mindful of what you're smelling and aware, and then recording it. And it's easy to record it. You just have to stop and remind yourself of the things that you're smelling. A lot of times, I'll make a comment about Ann and I were talking a little bit about what I do sometimes online, and I'll explain that in a sec. Um, but sometimes I sit and I have a sip of something, and then I sit back and I start thinking, okay, what was that? What was I actually tasting? And then once you become a little bit more aware, then everything starts popping in. So one of the things that I found that I've been doing lately is, I take a sip of beer and then you'll find me chewing. Do that. It's not an old man thing. I just want to make that really, really clear. I'm not at that stage where I'm just doing that. That is a retronasal experience that you do when you're tasting, and really what you're doing is you're opening up your palate to oxygen, and oxygen is helping your what you're tasting to drift up into your sinus cavity and into your olfactory system. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I think we all need to go back to Bulk Barn and go through some of their, like, even if you don't buy anything, just open the thing up and smell inside. It's just a really, really cool thing to do. I'm just trying to think of other things that we can chat about. I mean, we're in good time. I think we can open it up for a good discussion right now. This has really been, I mean, it's been a wonderful experience. I love quads. I love Belgian beers, and I love sharing my passion for it. I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I love Ontario beers too, like and Canadian beers. I think we have a set of amazing brewers in this great country, but I think that we just have to pay homage to what Belgium has done and what Germany has done and what England has done as well. That's asked a really interesting question. How would I classify Orval? And I know why Anne's saying ooh. She's saying ooh because of the chewing thing. Um, so I agree, thus. I think Orval is simply Orval, and it does not fit into any classification that anybody would have. It's not a triple. It's too light to be a quad or a double. It has earthiness and mustiness to it, and it has an intense hop characteristic on the back end from a bitterness perspective. Oh, thank you, Charles. We saw the little guy today, so it was really cool. Um, yeah, Orval is such a fascinating beer. I had one time at Beer Bistro in Toronto, and uh, Ray Bramberger, who was the bar manager at that time, brought in. We were doing a level three beer dinner, and Ray brought in a variety of different Orvals. Oh, I think that was his theme. His theme was he was taking level three, and his theme was four vertical flights of Orval, and one of them was like a 2008 Orval, and I could get so much lavender out of it. It just blew my mind. Um, oh yeah, you know. Okay, I see it, Annie. All right, sticking your nose in the bulk barn. You don't have to stick it right in the bin. You just open the bin and just smell. There's good smell. Um, Yeah, it does, Dave. They do use Brettanomyces yeasts, and so what Dave is asking is about Brett's, and Brett's are Brettanomyces yeast, and that gives it that barnyard farmy kind of nose to it. And when I say barnyard or farmy, I don't mean manure. I mean the mustiness or the stall or the fresh grass or hay that's in there. Um, to me, it's a really nice aromatic, and some people think about horse blankets, but it's something that I remember a little bit from some visits to farms when I was a child, or even if you go to Europe and you go visit a farm, you'll smell those kind of characteristics to it. I'm missing a few of my sips along the way. Let me give you a list of all the Trappist breweries. So in Belgium, we've got Chimay, which is the largest, Ashel, which we talked about, which is no longer considered part of the appellation, Orval, Rochefort, Westmalle, and Westverlettern. Westverlettern you will seldom see in the LCBO. Very, very cool beer. Yeah, I would agree, Harold. I think Orval does get way more complex. I don't. It's not one that I would think is amazing fresh, but I'm going to do my due diligence. I think one of the things I'm going to do with this case of Orval that I've got is I'm going to do tasting notes right away, and then I'm going to keep six of them aside and do one over the next 6 years and just continually write my tasting notes back to back to back to back so I can see exactly what the evolution has been. So we've got the six Belgian Trappist breweries. We've got two in the Netherlands, La Trappe being the largest of all of the um, Trappist breweries and the originator of the designation of La Trappe. So it comes from La Trappe in the Netherlands. The other one is the Abbey is called Tuflecht, and the beer that they produce is Zundert. So the other one that I've reviewed tonight, those are the two um, Dutch beers. We have one in Austria called Engelstell, one in Italy called Trefontaine. I've had one of their beers before. I got it in Buffalo. Lots of eucalyptus in that beer. It was really cool. It was a triple with eucalyptus. Fantastic. Um, the Other than the two that I mentioned earlier that aren't really brewing, the most two recent have been the one in Spencer, Massachusetts, which we've seen in Ontario from time to time, and they're making pretty good beers. I don't particularly view them to be as complex as the Belgian beers or the Dutch. And then the newest edition would be in England at the St. Joseph Abbey there. And quite frankly, I haven't been able to try any of their beers, but I have had almost all of them so far. Harold's got a bunch of aged Orval. Oh, thank you. Again, when this is all over, I'm going to invite myself, I think. So, any questions? I open it up to you guys. This has been fun. I've really enjoyed talking about quads, Belgian beers, Trappist beers, how to pour beer properly. It's been a little bit more of an involved session tonight, but I'm having lots of fun. So, any questions out there at all? I'm happy to answer them while I'm drinking, of course, or enjoying, not drinking. I will tell you that. Let me see. As I'm waiting for questions from you, we've got one more session of the style sessions next week, and then I have to check the calendar and see what's going on. I may flip things over. But next week we're going to venture into the world of sour beers, and I will let you know what I'm going to try. But for the most part, you can count on the fact that I am going to spend time with what I view to be the grandfather of sour beers, and that is Flanders Reds. And so most likely it'll be something like Rodenbach Classic or Duchesse de Bourgogne. And then we can have a little chat about some of the other sour beers in the marketplace, like Berliner Weiss or Goses, or what we're seeing now is kettle sours. All right, let me see. Charles, nice. I'm glad that you were a part of it as well. Um, Harold asked that brilliant question. What's the difference between a dark, strong Belgian ale and a quadruple? And to me, it's semantics. Um, I think some people just label them as dark, strong Belgian ales, and other people label them as quadruples. And I think some people don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific style. I would argue, personally, that they're virtually the same thing, especially if they're a dark ale, clearly. So Charles is asking a really good question. What do I think of the Ontario craft scene on Belgian doubles, triples, and quads? I don't really know very many people that are doing quads in Ontario. Um, there's a few people doing a triple here and there, but not very many people. The best double that I've had is far and away Royal City out of Guelph. They make an amazing double. Um, I'm just trying to think of the other brewery up that way. There's a few. Folly does something nice in Toronto, and they make some great beers. Um, but I think it's tough to make these beers really well. I think you have to be patient, and you've got to age them well. So that takes a little bit of time. Dan, some of these beers risk being delisted for lack of volume. Yes and no. Most of these beers come in on seasonal listings. Um, so, Dave, who I mentioned earlier at the LCBO, they get to see when something is available for purchase. It doesn't get automatically shipped into the LCBO, and there's a lot of beer ambassadors in the LCBO who wouldn't know whether that was a gold mine or not. Dave clearly understands that when Orval comes in, that he better order a ton of it. So a lot of it isn't really about delisting. It's about that they bring a limited amount of beer into the province, and when it's gone, it's gone. And then that distributor then comes back to the LCBO at a later date and tries to get a relisting again. So it's not like it's a core listing. Although for me, Belgian beers should be a core listing in the LCBO, all of them, like as many as possible. We still have lots of room for Ontario craft brewers, in my perspective. We might have, Craig. I'm going to go back and check. I'll have to relook at it. I think that that's a good question. I'll have to go back and look at whether we did sours or not. Block three makes a good quad. Okay. Duvel. How does Duvel fit in? Um, Duvel to me is a triple. Hands down. It's high alcohol. It's like 8 or 9% ABV. Same with delirium tremens. Typically, they're not necessarily re-fermented. They're bottle conditioned, which means that they're not filtered. But for me, they're still triples. They fit in with that category. Yeah, Great Lakes does a quad every once in a while, I think. Yeah. 11%. Wow. Yeah, we did sours. Okay. Then we're not doing sours next week. Suggestions? What do you want? I'm open. Anything that's out there that we haven't done? There's a couple of Scotch ales out there. We could do those. Um, we've done box. Just trying to think where else we can go. We could end up. Let me just think. Barley wine versus quad. Yeah, that's barley wines are really interesting beers. Scotch, like Scotch, not Scotch ale or um, barley wines are really, really interesting. I mean, it's a good story. I don't know how many are out there right now, and I don't know whether we could do a session on it. I'll have a look. I'll see what I can find. The thing about a barley wine though is it's really got to be aged. If you get a barley wine that was produced in 2020, it's not really going to be good until 2021, the end of it, and if not, wait until 2022. Scotch beers. Okay. I'll look around for some Scotch ales and talk about some Scotch beers next week then. Yeah. Yeah, I can do. I'm writing tasting notes on Scotch these days, and yeah, Dave's into barley wines, brown ales. Did we do brown ales? Thought we did brown ales at one point, Craig. All right, let me do some thinking. I'll check over the next day or two to figure out whether I can do Scotch ales or barley wines. My feeling is most likely Scotch ales because there's not a whole lot of barley wines out there. Mill Street does a barley wine, but to be honest, I'm not going to support talking about Mill Street or Labatt or no, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Those guys they have an amazing marketing machine. They don't need me talking about their beers. I would rather talk about something that I've seen in the marketplace that's a bit unique. Scotch ales. All right. I'll check into barley wines as well. All right. So we're gonna look for Scotch ales next week. Any other questions on quads? Comments on quads? We did stout. Well, Danny, that's a good question. I did stouts. Hated the audio on it. Hated the video. And so I took it off right away, and then I refilmed it a little while ago, so it's on there without all the interesting chatter and discussion. But there is one on stouts in there as well. All right. So I will say thank you as always for joining me. I really enjoy our time together. Um, it makes me really appreciate what I do for a living, and I love being with you guys. Make sure that you let other people know that we have a channel that we do this kind of stuff on, or that we have Prud'homme beer certification classes, which I hope are coming back in person really soon. But we've got these great sessions online as well, and then remote classes. Um, Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be looking into some Scotch ales, it looks like. So thanks very much. Cheers. Once again, I'm Roger Mittag from Prud'homme Beer Certification. And it would be, oh, you know what? Actually, that's a really interesting point. Non-alcoholic beers. I might have to do that one a separate time. So let me look at the calendar and we'll figure out when we can do some NA beers because that is a fascinating topic these days. Thank you, everybody. Wish I could see you in person, but we'll talk again soon. All right. Cheers.